Okay, today we're going to talk about some problem solving, developing problem solving skills in our children, which has actually become a bit of a lost skill to a certain extent in modern times. The reason why it's become a bit of a lost skill is that it needs to be taught by parents or carers to their children. And in modern times, this requires time, which we're all getting shorter of as we go along, and also as well as time, it also requires a confidence to be able to let go, to be able to let our child take over the problem-solving situation. And the modern world is often telling us that we shouldn't do that, that we should get in there and hover over them and solve the problems for them. So it has become a bit more of a problem in recent times, to such an extent that in the US there's been a trend to describe the college students who are in their late teenage years as a teacup generation, that they are like teacups. They're so fragile that when confronted with a problem they break like a teacup would. Of course, we want the opposite of that. We want our children to be resilient and to be able to deal with confronting or problematic situations. So of course this is something we have to teach them. When does this start? Now generally it starts as they start acquiring enough language that they can problem solve for themselves, and that we can also talk to them about problem solving. So around that 2 to 3 year old age group is where we start discussing it. And of course, what do we mean by problem? I mean, a problem can be a huge variation. It could be like, am I going to scratch my head with this hand or with this hand? Or even right up to, I'm a US president about to launch a nuclear strike. I mean, they're both problems, and both of those problems are within the same structure about how we're going to solve a problem. So this is actually referred to as structured problem solving. So what is this structure? Well, first of all, it starts out with defining what the actual problem is. So, you know, that someone's being mean to me, or this boy took my toy, or whatever that problem is. So we actually define what it is. Then we actually have to think about what options we have to that particular problem. It could be option A, option B, or option C, or whatever. And then with each option then, we then look at the pros and the cons of each of those proposed solutions. So you can see here it's getting bigger. It started out as defining the problem, and then looking at options, and then looking at all the pros and cons of each of those options. Then from all that, we then bring it down again, and we bring it down to what our decision is actually going to be. And really it's the fleshing out that is more important than the decision making, to look broadly, to consider all options. And so it kind of has a diamond shape. It gets wider in terms of the way we're thinking about it, and then it comes down to a narrow point of our decision. And from the decision we then have an action, and then from the action we can even then have a review later on. So that's basically the structure of problem solving. It's what we want to encourage our children to do. In the 2 and 3 year olds, when we first start doing this, of course, they're very impulsive. They will get to an agitated state like crying or a tantrum very quickly. So what we want to do is to build these problem solving skills in before they get to that agitated state. So really what we're trying to do is to teach them how to think, how to slow down, and before you get to that agitated state, to develop other skills about sorting a particular problematic situation out by themselves. So early on though, of course, they may not have very developed skills. So how can we help them get over this challenge of developing a problem solving skill? Well, we can maybe describe the problem at the beginning anyway, certainly describe the problem for them. So say, okay, this is actually the problem you're dealing with. And maybe we could hint at some of the solutions at first. You know, what else could, or even prompt them to start thinking about it. What else could you have done in that situation? Besides hitting him, was there any other way you could have approached that situation? And by developing those skills, and then as they get better at them, we can then back off and maybe not hint so much and just let them think of it themselves. So this can go over years and years, basically through the entirety of childhood. So what we're trying to avoid is just basically handing over the decision to them. We don't want to give them the solution. If we give them the solution, really, then they haven't learned anything. They may have solved the problem, but they haven't learnt anything. And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to teach and build their skills.